Hello and welcome back to ScaleTale, the podcast that delves deep into the realm of customer success and uncovers the strategies that lead to sustainable revenue growth for businesses. I'm your host, Mausmi, and I'm thrilled to have you with us on this exciting journey. In today's episode, we'll be diving into the critical topic of tracking success metrics for early stage companies. We'll explore the key metrics that provide valuable insights into customer success and how they can pave the way to achieving your business goals. But before we jump into the specifics, let me remind you, subscribe to ScaleTale on your favorite podcast platform so that you never miss an episode packed with actionable insights and inspiring success stories. And if you've been finding value in our podcast, don't forget to leave us a review and share it with your fellow CS professionals. To shed light on the topic, mastering customer success metrics for early stage companies, we have invited an extraordinary guest today, Donna Weber. Donna is the world's leading expert in customer onboarding and customer success. For more than 2 decades, she has helped high-growth startups and established enterprises transform new and existing customers into loyal champions. As a recognized thought leader, influencer, strategist, advisor, author, and speaker, Donna gets to the heart of customer success. Prior to founding her boutique consulting firm in 2016, Donna worked at several startups where she built customer success and customer education programs and organizations from scratch. Donna's award-winning book, Onboarding Matters, here it is an amazing, powerful resource that encapsulates how successful companies transform new customers into loyal champions. Welcome to the podcast, Donna. I'm a big fan, and I cannot tell you how happy I am to have you at the podcast.
Thank you so much for including me. It's a real pleasure to talk with you today.
Oh, it's my pleasure and an honor as well, Donna, to have this conversation with you. So, Donna, tell me a little bit about, how you went into, doing so much in customer success in your journey. I mean, this is just unbelievable amount of things that you've done over a period of time.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Well, you know what? I found myself listening and asking questions about what other people were talking about in customer success. And I saw some gaps and things that seemed very obvious to me. And it was, at the earlier stages, customer success was very reactive. It was very focused on the renewal. And people were not focused on the beginning of the customer journey. And it seemed so obvious to me that was an area that needed to be addressed and nobody was talking about it. I kept going, why isn't anyone talking about this? This is so important.
Yeah.
And then I realized, wait, maybe that's what I'm supposed to do. That's my job to talk about it and write about it. And since then, there's just been this huge transformation. There's so many onboarding software vendors now, and people really have recognized that onboarding is the most important part of the journey. And I'm really excited to see all that traction happening in this important space.
I think, as I went into my journey, in my first startup and a second startup, early days, onboard, we didn't, 2012, 13, not a lot of people were talking about onboarding so much. And for me, it was a lot of things that we did. We made mistakes and we were trying to, measure things in some way or the other, trying to invent metrics or use metrics that were out there, which did not work out for us as well. So, now that I'm reading this, I am feeling, why didn't you write it earlier? I could have read it, and a lot of things that I did could have been done so much better. So, when I start talking about metrics, and that is what I want to really, pick your brain on and really learn from you as to what are the key metrics for customer success for an early stage company, because there are so much online, so many numbers and metrics. But when you are in an early stage of your journey, there is only so much you can track. So what are the things that you think you should start focusing on early days, 4 or 5 key things, and not get, lost in this ocean of numbers and metrics that are out there and which sort of really confuse people?
Well, first of all, metrics matter, because especially these days, a lot of companies, a lot of chief financial officers are really examining where they're spending money, what the costs are, and they're looking to cut costs. So right now, it's really important to show the impact that your business, that your organization, that your team, that the work you do has on the business. So metrics matter. Now, what are you measuring? A lot of customer success and onboarding teams, they're tracking, maybe how many companies they've onboarded, maybe how many meetings they've had, and how many, they're tracking things, but that might be interesting, but is it really important? So maybe you've told management, we've had 22 meetings this month. Well, so what? What does that mean to the business bottom line? Are you just wasting customers' times? So what I like to do is really look at, well, what is the business talking about, and how can you measure what you do that correlates with what the business is measuring? So, for example, let's just say, the company's looking at product usage, right? That would be a really interesting thing, like product adoption. One company I talked to yesterday, they talked about a big metric for them is monthly active users. All right. So it all depends on what's important to your company. Especially, you're not going to be able to demonstrate during onboarding if a company is renewing yet. So, of course, retention is really key. Net revenue retention, the NRR that everyone talks about today, those are really key. But that's going to take a while. That's going to take 12 months to track.
Correct.
But you might know that, hey, when customers adopt the product, are they more likely to expand? That would be really interesting to track, like product usage. Hey, we know when customers use these features in the product, they stick around, they're more loyal. So then I would want to kind of track that product usage. Well, how would you track product usage? There's some tools you can deploy. There's vendors that do that, and that would be really important. So you need to know, is your onboarding approach working? Are people actually using your product? The point of onboarding is not just to go live and have people log in. Logging in does not deliver value to anybody. Okay.
Correct.
So they need to be able to, is it create their first report? Is it to, deliver a digital waiver? One company I worked with, they found that when their customers sign digital waivers, this is for like amusement parks, that they are more sticky. Well, great. Let's measure how long it takes customers to get to the digital waiver. That would be interesting. Another thing, I could go on and on. I'm going to give one more. Is, let's say, like, hey, in general, like when customers use certain things, they tend to buy more. That would be really interesting because you can show the impact of what you do on increased revenue for your company. Actually, I'm going to add one more, which we'll dive into more in a moment. Please. Is the cost of onboarding. How long does onboarding take, and how much is that costing you? Those are just a handful of really important. And as you can hear in my voice, I can keep going.
What you're saying is that do not track just activity. Do not just track a lot of activity that we are doing meetings and we are doing this and we are doing that, but more focus on understanding what outcomes move your needle and then track those outcomes instead of, I had so many meetings and so many calls and so many messages responded and so many Slack messages responded. But what did it turn into? Did it increase product adoption or whatever moves the needle in your business?
Absolutely. I love how you sum that up. And you know what? I worked at a startup where I launched and was the head of a customer education team. We were very busy. I reported on the course evaluation scores. We had very high course evaluations. We had great feedback. Customers loved us. We delivered a lot of courses. But guess what? My entire team was cut. This is in the last recession in 2008, because we weren't demonstrating the impact on the business bottom line. And, we could say, hey, customers love us, but we delivered 10 classes last month. So what? What does that mean? And so we as professionals need to translate that to the business, that what I was reporting on, all that activity and the feedback it was not translating. And when it was time to look at where costs were going, the executives were left wondering, what are they doing for me? And we don't want them guessing.
Yes, this is something that has come up quite often, and we've heard it very regularly in the recent year, where the focus of startups and businesses, earlier, like 2, 3 years ago, it was more about growth, 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 and that's where everybody was focused
It was
on.
growth at all costs.
Growth at all costs, exactly. But now the storyline and the way the investors talk is changed. Their expectation has changed. They are asking in board meetings about what your NRRs are. They are asking in board meetings as to, is your business operationally profitable? Are you, or at least are you aligned towards profitable? Is the unit economics making sense? Now, when that comes into the picture, and when people were under stress, when they started cutting teams, with sales, the outcome of cutting team and the result is very instant. You see that in like a month. You reduce your sales team, your throughput reduces, your conversion reduces, less number of new customers. With customer success, if you cut the teams, the result and outcome takes certain time frame before the negative impact affects your business, right? Because it's sort of the base foundation on where the business stands. If you break the foundation, it won't fall down immediately, but eventually there will be negative impact. So how do you make sure that with the metrics you align it with business and sort of being able to explain to the management in a company or as a startup founder as well, to understand what that the value that this particular team is bringing in?
Well, so I want to just add one thing, which we can get to, is before I address that, is you also need to tell your customers, make sure that they don't wonder, the value. You need to absolutely point out to them the value, because you don't want them to be cutting out your product if they don't see the value.
Yes, yes.
But what I like to do is start very simple and be curious. I was doing one of my customer success forums, and one of the folks on there was like, you need massive amount of data. And I don't agree. I like to talk about a core sample. So just like if I was a scientist and I wanted to go and understand what, like in my yard, what the soil is comprised of, I would drill down and take out a core sample, and I would get all the different levels. Maybe let's say I get 5 feet of, I'm not going to dig up my entire yard to understand everything that's in there. And so what we do is I also call that an audit. So you might start with understanding, just go like, hey, what does this mean when the customers get to this type of feature? Do they expand faster? Are they logging less support tickets? Can I demonstrate that when customers go through my onboarding or customer success framework, do they buy more? Do they cost the company less? So you might look at, let's say, 5 customers who haven't been through a proper onboarding and 5 who have, and just see like, well, what kind of product usage do they have? How many support tickets have they logged? And when do they expand? Like those would be 3 metrics. That would be really simple to start with. And then you can just go, wow, those 5 that maybe went through our program, they adopted the product faster, they bought more seats more quickly, and they logged 30% less support tickets. And then very simply, you go, well, how much additional expansion revenue is that? How much does each support ticket cost? And then you can start to demonstrate, wow, we're saving the company money, we're making the company money. And if those looks compelling, then likely you could sit down with someone in finance. If that looks really compelling, they might say, hey, let's get a data scientist on this and really dig into it. So I like to say start simple. And whenever you're rolling out something new, start with a baseline, because if you don't know the impact of what you're doing, then how are you going to know? So let's say you're going to start doing customer handoffs, internal handoffs and customer handoffs, and a success plan. Start with 5 customers and just compare to like, what's the baseline of customers who've never had those? And then track the difference of let's say you roll that out to 5 or 10 customers. Like, what do you see? What's the difference? Does onboarding take less time? If it takes 20% time, how much money are you saving the company? So those are the things you want to really start to have those kind of You just be curious, just ask questions. I mean, Mausmi, I can't tell you how many companies I work with where they're busy onboarding customers and they have no regard for what that's costing the company. They're treating every customer with special care. It's a high touch, white glove treatment, and that might feel good because I'm helping you feel that all your desires and needs are being met. But they have no regard for what's that costing the company. And many times they're spending more to onboard the customer than what the customer is paying them. So they're actually hindering the company because the company is now losing money.
So, that segues into a very important point. I mean, I love how you put it, made it so simple to sort of calculate what any action that you do and how it would impact. Now, what you started segueing in the end, I think that's a very important point. And there's so much focus, particularly in early growth startup, that, measure your CAC, customer acquisition cost, or COCO, cost of customer acquisition, measure that. But there is not enough talk about cost of customer onboarding. So yes, you're measuring up till the acquisition, but there is a cost after that, which sort of completely gets ignored because there is no focus on measuring that cost. And when you talk about unit economics, that also comes into the picture, and very importantly. In fact, a lot of financial blogs, since I'm running my own startup, I read a lot about, how to measure things within my business and trying to put the dashboard together. So people talk about how to measure LTV. There are 10,000 ways to cost of acquisition. You would measure cost of customer acquisition blended, and they're like just marketing and just sales or just this channel. So there's a lot to packed in it, but very little conversation, which is something which I only found actually in one of your write-ups, of finding cost of customer onboarding, which from a finance perspective, since I manage that also is a very important cost that if you're not controlled will sort of cut into your profitability and unit economics. Right.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I think that is something, if you can, just shed a light a little more on how to go about it and how important it is.
Yeah, I work with a lot of companies, a lot of small companies, startups around the world, and I was seeing how much time and effort they were spending. So let's say they're selling a product, average selling price is $10,000. Their onboarding is, 90 to 120 days.
Wow.
And then I would start looking at how much money they're spending to onboard a customer and realizing they're losing money. And, while a company might track CAC, customer acquisition costs, they don't know what it's costing to onboard. And if a customer leaves in that first year, let's say, oftentimes CAC is 1.5 to 2 times the average selling price for the first year. So let's say the average selling price is $10,000. That means, let's say they're spending $15,000 to acquire a customer. But oftentimes they're spending, maybe
additional
1.5 times on the COCO, the cost of customer onboarding, which is a metric that I've defined. And so now they're spending, so let's say that's $15,000 plus another, let's say $10,000, $25,000 to acquire and onboard a customer. If that customer leaves in the first year, they are now down $25,000 without actually making any money. It's going to take them 2.5 years to break even. If the customer does not stick around for 2.5 years, they've lost money. And I think this is just a huge thing to highlight, especially when customer success and onboarding teams are just busy running around doing whatever customers want and ask for with no regard to the cost of the company.
And it's so important that, when you try to draw that line that, after X months, we will start making money from this customer, right? Because we have spent so much in acquiring, and that customer cost of onboarding doesn't get added. You are just missing that you will actually lose money even if the customer leaves after that. You don't need the customer for like 3 months, 6 months or 12 months. You actually need them for like additional 5 months to actually start making profits out of that customer. And that is a very important metric which sort of missed, is like a hidden cost inside the business, which will bite you someday, right? If it's not controlled. And that is something like it's like a snake inside your business. You haven't seen, but it can bite you any day when you actually start working out details into unit economics and your maths doesn't work out.
Yeah, and so many in the world of customer success, we're just such a great community. We're all very helpful. We're all very enthusiastic. And a concern is that we're all in our own echo chamber, and so we're all convince each other how great we are. But do the CEOs, the CFOs who are making some big decisions these days that in all days, but they're not fully convinced. And so I've seen customer success professionals be really shocked that customer success teams are being, limited or cut. Like, don't they know how important we are? Well,
Probably don't.
They don't, and two, we need to translate into their language. It's really critical.
Exactly.
We can't just think we're great and know that all the stuff we do is important. It needs to be in the terms that they understand, which is basically money. Are you making money or are you saving money?
Or you're saving money. Yes, they're just two parts, isn't it? Either you're bringing in money or you're reducing costs. They're just two parts of it. If you can impact one of those, then it makes sense.
And then I got to tell you, I was teaching a class earlier today, and there was a discussion about, do we charge for onboarding? Do we charge for customer success? And I say absolutely, because if you can turn your organization from a cost center, or we know we impact the business bottom line, but the company often sees onboarding and customer success as a cost center. Then a cost center is always looked at how you can be more efficient. So it's going to be a struggle to get the resources and the tools that you need to thrive, to get to the next level. But if you charge for customer success and onboarding, then you get to run a profit and loss P&L. Now, maybe you're break even. Maybe you have very small margins. It's not about making a huge profit, but now you have a budget. You can show where I have an income, and I'm going to use that income to invest in my team, invest in upskilling my team, invest in tools. And now you have like your sandbox to play in. And, I know a chief customer officer in the UK who he's got his budget, and as long as he manages his budget, he's fine. And so then you have a lot more autonomy to run your business. And if you're a cost center, you're really at the mercy of the cost cutting that's happening all around the world right now.
And that's an important point, but early stage startup, like where, the context of it might be a little hard to ask for, paying for the services in early days, I guess. Do you think it is possible to, ask because in early days, you do a lot of non-scalable things. You probably are doing more effort in onboarding in early days, or giving a lot more than you would eventually, because you want to have like really loyal customers. Plus your product is also evolving, right? It's changing. You need that feedback. So is it possible to ask for very early days, or is it something that you measure and put on the table that this is the cost? So the CXOs and CFOs realize that, okay, eventually we should charge for it because we are doing something like that. Because even if you can't charge in early days.
I think there's an opportunity to charge even for early days, because the reality is when customers pay for onboarding, they show up to the meetings, they're more accountable, they do what's been asked. And so there's a much more partnering for success. And when they don't, they kind of, like they're going to ghost you. They're not going to take it as seriously. Now, one thing you could do is say, look, onboarding costs $10,000, but we waive the fee. So they might see that there's a value in it. That might be a way to start. But you're still going to be seen as a cost center. That's a way to think about. You might be not charging for it, and you are a cost center initially, but having that vision, that goal that we're going to move into charging for it and be a P&L. Yeah.
Having that vision, I think that's very important. Now, how do you measure it? Very important. Like, since you have devised, COCO, I like the name though. So how do you actually go about measuring that cost in terms of numbers?
Thank you. So COCO, the cost of customer onboarding, generally in a high touch approach, onboarding is the time and labor costs. So let's say onboarding is taking 100 days, and maybe or let's say it's taking 90 days. I keep the math simple. Let's say it takes 90 days and an onboarding specialist can handle 3 accounts at a time. So they're spending a third of their time. So that's 30 days of effort. And then maybe it's just one person. So we'll just keep it simple. So let's say it's 30 days of effort. And I like to say it's about 6 hours of actual kind of, billable time, you'd say, in a day. And let's say for ease of use, they're paid $100 an hour. So that's that's 30 days times 6 hours. So that's 180 hours. And I'm going to do my little calculator. 180
that's fine.
Times 100 is, that would be like it's usually not 100, but just to keep it simple, fully loaded costs of an onboarding person. That includes not just their salary, but also their benefits or they're going to the office. So you could get the fully loaded costs from anyone in the finance team, right?
Full cost
so then
to company.
And then maybe there's some tools or some other things that are engaged, or maybe there's some CSM involved as well. So right now, just that simple calculation tells me that onboarding is costing $18,000. And if the average selling price we've discussed already is $10,000, then you've got minus 80% margin already. So and then we look at we add the cost of acquisition there, and that's my metric COCO, cost of onboarding plus cost of acquisition. And if that was $15,000, now you're looking at $33,000
and the numbers,
acquire. Yes. Yeah, and now it's 3.3 years to break even, and if they churn, you've lost a ton of money. So,
understood.
And the thing is, let's say then we go, okay, onboarding is taking 90 days. How can we shorten that? How can we reduce that cost? So that's what I would want to look to,
Understood.
And so maybe it's 90 days. Well, can we reduce that by 20%? I think reducing by 20% is a good place to start. And then, are we delivering any value? How can we get them to value? How can we get them to buy more? And then you're reducing costs and increasing the revenue.
The revenue as well.
Yeah.
So in early days, again, I go back to early stage startup because that's the kind of audience that comes for us to, listen to this podcast. So in early day startup, when 1 to 10 and 10 to, 0 to 1 and 1 to 10 journey, a lot of CSM sort of do multiple things, right? So they are also doing onboarding. They are also managing customers. They're not segregated. As the business matures, of course, you would separate an onboarding team and a success team. But early days, the only teams that people in early days separate is support, right? Support is separated very early and it's very well sorted. But as the business grows, it takes a while. Like, when you have 100, 150 customers, particularly for a B2B SaaS, that's when you start separating onboarding teams and the success teams. But before that, it's very combined. So is it fair to say that we can take the overall cost of the CS in that time period, let's say a month, and the number of companies that were onboarded during that time and do the math from that basis? Because even if they are doing customer success, that is also part of managing and retention.
Well, I wouldn't want to focus completely on, let's say if the goal is to measure onboarding. So it depends. You might say, what is it costing to engage a customer for the first month? Then that would be appropriate. But if that CSM is doing many things, it might be helpful. Let's track all the different things we're doing, so we know how much time I'm spending doing onboarding. So you might track, you might do a kind of time audit for a month. It doesn't mean you're going to do it forever, but you might do a time audit for a month. So you get realistic.
Estimate.
I got to tell you, Mausmi, that like I was working with a company, and when I started with them, they said, hey, onboarding is taking us about 8 weeks. We want to reduce it to 4. Okay, great. Well, then we dug in, we tracked the current, and we built out the optimized. And the reality is that onboarding is taking 12 weeks. And so oftentimes people have this perception internally, or it's supposed to take 30 days, but the reality is it actually takes 45. So you got to get realistic to really know what it's costing your company, because if you just think, well, it's supposed to take 8 weeks. Well, but the reality, I mean, when I told the CEO, well, it's taking 12 weeks, he was speechless.
I'm sure he would have fallen off from his seat.
And the company can't recognize revenue until they go live.
Wow.
So they're sitting around for 3 months unable to recognize revenue. So this is really important. If people are just, it takes what it takes, or we're sitting around waiting for our customers to do what they need to do. I was teaching a class yesterday. We were talking about the urgency. I have my orchestrated onboarding masterclass, and they're like, well, we don't want to like force customers into, you got to create some urgency because customers aren't getting value and your company can't even recognize revenue. And it's just, if they're not getting any value, then they're sitting around and, nothing's going to happen.
And they'll eventually leave if they don't, onboard. Yeah. And if they are very slow, they will forget about it and they don't get the value by the time. Yeah.
It's like, I like to use a trainer analogy. If I sign you up to be my personal trainer and you're like, hey, Donna, just call me when you feel like working out. Like, most days I don't feel like working out. I do it because I know it's good for me, and like, I want you to kick my butt, right?
Yes, that's the reason I'm paying. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, we need to create that urgency so that you deliver results. So then I'm going to think you're awesome. And I tell all my friends to come and hire you.
So let me just unpack what you just said. So what you were saying is that do a small section of your team, sort of a time analysis, so you can clearly understand the percentage of time being spent on onboarding and the time being spent on retention. And then to be able, and it doesn't have to be like elaborate, it can be done over a small period of time. And that's a very good example of being able sample data, of being able to extrapolate and then go on calculating very clearly cost of customer onboarding, because that might, if you don't do that, you might have a lot of hidden things, like how long your onboarding is, how much time you are actually spending. And you might even realize that you are not spending enough time on customer success as well. So, to unpack that, sort of go into doing at least a sample study of time duration that you're spending in onboarding and separating in customer success, even if the same person is doing it. Absolutely. And this also brings us to that if we are able to separate that, then we would also be able to calculate the cost of retention, because now we have the customer success team time understood, that how much time my success team is spending over retaining customers, doing those QBRs and monthly, conversations and things like that over a period of time. So it sort of gives me that number as well. And I think that number also becomes important when I'm trying to calculate my profitability, isn't it?
Absolutely. I was just reading an article this week from another customer success platform that talks about CRC, the customer retention costs, and it is very thorough. They did not include customer onboarding costs. I think that was a big area that they missed, but it had a lot of analysis, very detailed kind of formulas around that, because they often say CAC is about like 1.5 to 2 times the average, the first year license value. And then the CRC, I've also heard it called core, customer cost of retention. And this article called it CRC. So you want to, generally that's going to be about kind of 10 cents on the dollar, right? You want it a lot lower. But they were saying sometimes if it's too low, it means you're not investing in your customers and they're not going to stick around and expand. So it's important that you are investing in your customers, whether in a higher touch or lower or digital touch. But you can't just, I see so many companies, they onboard their customers, they check the box and that's it, and there's so much land and expand opportunity, and more companies are moving to consumption models. So if you're not delivering some initial value and then ongoing value, you are missing huge growth potential, huge compounding revenue potential.
Absolutely. And, I nowadays, like as I see a lot of, like there's lots of customer success platforms out there, and they're creating such amazing content trying to focus on all of these parameters and to sort of update customer success professionals. And as you also mentioned, in terms of understanding that it's very important for us to not only just do our job, but also to align with numbers and metrics. Otherwise, internally as well as externally, the value of this entire division is sort of gets diluted.
And the value of our entire industry.
Yes, the value of the entire industry. And I think almost everybody within this industry, who is trying to sort of update people and, put this thought process forward, that, this is now time to change. This is now time to have a different perspective towards customer success. It's not just relationship. It's very important to make sure that we are aligned with the business objectives internally, as well as with the customer's business objectives.
Absolutely. And, Customer Success 1.0 was very reactive. It was all about delighting the customer. Customer Success 2.0 is more proactive and prescriptive. Customer Success 3.0, we're getting more into, scaling. That's what everyone's talking. And then I'm starting to see a lot more people talking about the metrics. So I don't know if that's 3.5 or 4.
Well, we'll wait for your next book, Donna. Maybe you will define Customer 4.0.
Yeah, maybe. But it's all about, I'm seeing a lot more leaders talking about the metrics. And it's all about delivering results to the company and to the customers, delivering measurable results.
Great. Thank you, Donna. I really, really enjoyed this conversation. I have just one last question. And I think it would be great if you can just emphasize this a little bit. What are the, you already covered it. What are the mistakes that people do while, calculating these metrics? I mean, the first mistake is don't calculate anything. That's sacrilegious.
And then the second mistake is tracking activities and not the impact of those activities. And then the third is making assumptions. Onboarding takes 8 weeks when in reality it takes 50% longer. So take time to track it. Nobody likes to track their time, but do it for a month. It's fascinating what you can learn. So really map out the process and find out what's going on. And I'm here to help. So just reach out if I can be of help in any way.
Let me just add one more point that you did say in your discussion is don't get overboard with trying to do massive data analysis. Don't do that. Pick a sample, take analysis, go deep in that and move from there. Getting, bogged down with numbers and data, it will just waste time. So don't try to be massive, but pick a sample, make an analysis.
Yeah.
And then eventually you can do that.
And be curious. Most customer success teams, they just feel powerless when it comes to data. So we need to kind of remove that mystique that, I need all the data. You don't need all the data. Just dig around and do some manual kind of, hey, what happens when customers do this versus when they don't do that? And just be curious.
Thanks, Donna. This was absolutely amazing discussion, as expected from someone like you, of course.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Donna, for sharing valuable insights. Your expertise and real-life examples have truly inspired me, and I'm sure they will inspire our listeners as well. Big thanks to the listeners for tuning in with us today. If you like to connect with Donna on LinkedIn or get your hands on Donna's award-winning book, Onboarding Matters, then links are in the description. Trust me, this is amazing. This is worth your time. Read it. And do check her out. I'm sure you're going to learn loads from her. And if you enjoyed this episode, we invite you to follow and subscribe to our podcast. You can find us on all podcast platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube. And stay tuned for the next exciting episode coming soon. Thanks a lot, Donna. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mausmi.